What's up, guys? What's going on? I'm Paul. This is Pauline Theology's daily devotional, and we are in the book of John. We've been studying about Jesus, the pre-incarnate Jesus. We've been just diving deep into his relationship with the world, with his Father, though we haven't talked about him being Father, but we about to start that today. I don't want to spoil it for you, so if you haven't checked it out, go ahead and read this verse here, the incarnation verse, John 1:14. Stop the tape, check it out, see what it has to say, come back, and we will answer the 4 questions and discuss. If you've already read it, man, let's go ahead and start discussing them, man. What does John 1:14 say? It says, "And the Word became flesh, and he dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory. The glory is the only begotten, or the only one from the Father, full of grace and truth." There is so much in this to unpack. I mean, John is saying so much. John is doing so much with these words here. We talked about him being a wordsmith. He goes back to using logos again, the word. The word became flesh. So now we're going back to the original usage of who we're speaking about when we talk about this true light, this life, this word. And now we're going to see that this life, this true light, which we already know decided to come into his own creation. We talked about that in the last episode. But now we're going to make that coming into his own creation, that coming to his own people, like what does that mean? And he says that this light, this life that came into his own creation, this word, we go back to the one who was with God from the beginning and who also is God, the God of Israel, Yahweh. This word became flesh. Man, that means that this pre-existent, infinite, almighty, invisible, this one who is supreme above all beings, robed himself, clothed himself in flesh. Now, I know oftentimes we think about flesh and we say it's like a bad thing, right? Because of the usage that Paul has oftentimes when he says, man, we want to reject the flesh. We want to starve the flesh. But the way John uses it is very different. What he wants us to think of when he says flesh is he's talking about the raw bones, the blood, the skin, all of that, man. All of that stuff that is wrapped up in what humanity is. That is what Jesus did. That is what the Word has done. He has not emptied himself of any kind of godhood. He remains 100% God. As it said in the beginning, the Word was God. The Word was Yahweh, the one who is the covenant holder of Israel. But he also has become 100% flesh with all the bones, the gristle, the meat, the blood, eyeballs, all of that stuff, man. He partook in that part of his creation, man. And then furthermore, it goes on and it says that he dwelt among us. This word for dwelt is so reminiscent of what God desired to do in the very first place. The real word means that he tented, he pitched a tent. Now, the idea is not that he was just going to be here temporarily. Like I said, it comes from the Old Testament where God called forth the people to build a tent in which his presence could reside. Because God not only wanted his presence to reside with the people, but he also wanted to dwell with them. He wanted to live amongst them. He wanted to be a part of their city. Well, it wasn't a city at the time, but he wanted to be a part of their community. And so that word here is reminiscent of that. It's reminding of the fact that Jesus came down and is a perfect picture, or what they say par excellence, the defining picture of what it is for God to dwell or reside with his people. It further goes on, it says, and we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten from the Father, man. And so it says that we got to see this. This we is either, probably most likely, is that the eyewitnesses, John, who wrote this, who was an eyewitness, but also everyone else, the story he's about to tell, he's like, I saw these things. We saw these things. We saw this glory. And this glory is a specific kind of glory. It says as the one and only, or some say the only begotten. But more specifically, it's one and only. There's been a lot of word studies on this Greek word monogenes, and it's far more than what I can comprehend or even think about. But one essence or idea that comes from it is that it is only, that there is one, and then it is also like become or like him. And so there is a specific thing that this one who is the Word that dwells amongst us, and he shines this glory. It's a specific thing that he alone can do. I think they call it kind in class. That there's a class of this oneness that no one will ever be in. That there is only one in his status. And that his kind is different. That he is different from any other as well. So in status, he's different, but in kind, he's also different. He is the one and only from the Father. Matter of fact, so much so that when Paul uses, I'm sorry, not Paul, but when John uses this word son, when he uses this word huios in the Greek, it is only for Jesus. It is never for any other being. You see, earlier when we read, it says that we might have the right to become children of God. Some translate it as sons of God. I don't think any of the newer translations do that, but King James did. But that's not what it actually says. It actually says children, because John wants to distinguish between the difference of people who come to faith and then Jesus himself. Because Jesus is the only one. There is none like him, and he comes from the Father. He was sent from the Father. And so now we have this relationship. We show this relationship between who this Word is and who was with God from the beginning. This relationship is a father-son relationship. What's so great about this understanding is that God has always been Father. And because he's always been a father, that means he's always had a son. There has never been a time in which he was not a father, because this is a core attribute of who he is. And there has never been a time that he has not been without a son. And so that just goes to show even more the eternalness of this Word who comes to dwell with us. Now, he is the one and only from the Father, sent from the Father, that he came on a mission from the Father, and he's full of grace and truth. This grace and truth, if you were a Hebrew reading this and understanding Greek and Hebrew both, you would automatically turn to Exodus. And in Exodus, the part where Moses asked God, Yahweh, to reveal himself, he said, show me your glory. Show me your glory. And we're talking about how they beheld that glory, right? And what God does is he says that, man, I can't show you my face, the fullness of who I am, because, man, no person can see it or they would die. He says, but I'm going to show you it. And then he declared who he was in word. He began to say that he's the compassionate one, slow to anger. And he ends and he says this about himself. He says that he is steadfast and merciful. Those two words have a strong meaning because they correspond with what's going on here. This grace is that covenant grace. And that is akin to the word hesed in the Old Testament that is used, or that God uses of himself when he describes who he is. He says that he is merciful, gracious. That's what that hesed means. It's a covenant love. And we talked about this a little bit if you were with me in Genesis. But then he also says that he is full of truth. So not only was he hesed, having this mercy, this steadfast love, this grace, but he was also emet, which means faithful or true. And so when John uses these two words as descriptors of this word that was made flesh, he is saying that the glory that they beheld was the exact glory of Yahweh, the glory of the Father. Right there just demonstrates the oneness that is within the Godhead. Because when we talk about what a son is, we spoke about this in Genesis when we were at the very beginning speaking about the image of Adam and how God had created him in his image, is we see that Jesus is the perfect representation of who the Father is. He demonstrates this as he walks on this earth. So what is this saying about God? Well, it says that God desires a relationship with his people. He tabernacled amongst us. That's what some people say when they read this. That he dwelt among us means that he wants to be with us, his people. He wants to live amongst us. And the word here for that tabernacle is only used, I think, 4 more times. And they're all in Revelation. And they all speak about how we will dwell with God forever in heaven. And so this word, it conjures up images of the fact that God wants to be with us. He wants to be in a relationship with us. And so in this way, man, God desires a relationship with his people. It also says that God desires to be known because he has made himself known. He has revealed himself in Jesus now. It says, and they saw him. They beheld that glory. They saw the glory. And now we as well have an opportunity to behold it. Matter of fact, in Hebrews, it says that God has spoken to us in these last days with his final words, which is through Jesus. Isn't that kind of crazy too when he says he has spoken to us in these final days through Jesus? Because who is Jesus? He's the Word. And so God desires to be known. And finally, God has revealed himself through the person of Jesus. This Word has become flesh. 100% God and 100% man. What's this say about man? Is that we have the privilege to be in the presence of God. We have the privilege to be in the presence of the true King, the one who created all things. We can be in relationship with him, man. That's marvelous. That's what it says about us here. So how do we apply these truths to our lives? Well, I think first off, we need to take a look at Jesus. See who he is. Because the purpose and the point of us reading these scriptures is so that we can trust God more. And what better to know the character, the fullness of the character of God, which was spoken about in this verse we read, the fullness of his character, than to look upon the person of Jesus. That's what we're doing today. And that's what we're going to continue to do as we go through the book of John. And then finally, just rest in the knowledge that God wants a relationship with you. And if you do know him, if you have come to trust him in his saving life, in his power, his light, man, rest in that. Take it in, breathe it in, hold it in. Ruminate in that, soak it up. And if you don't know him today, then get to know him. Trust in him. Because he is infinitely worthy of that trust. I appreciate you guys for listening. And again, I apologize if you're trying to watch this on YouTube because something's going on with my internet connection and I'm not able to record these videos. But I appreciate you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.